You know, a lot of people from different countries like to make fun of Americans because we eat too much, like they don't eat too. But they have a point this one time. This one time we did eat an entire species into extinction. So our bad. But I wasn't even born yet, and neither was anyone watching this video. Because if you were born back then, you're probably not on a computer. This video is about the passenger pigeon. Not to be confused with the carrier pigeon. Completely different kinds of transportation birds. You've probably never heard of the passenger pigeon. You've definitely never seen a passenger pigeon. That's because they are all dead. Every last passenger pigeon has been wiped off the face of this earth by a hungry American. It happens sometimes. We're not the only country that has ever eaten an animal into extinction either. So don't let anyone say anything about that. They are not better than us. But we did do it this one time. Now, about 200 years ago, this being 2020, so about 1820, you could walk out of your house and see the entire sky blacked out by flocks of these pigeons. They were that plentiful. People say they were a third of all the birds in North America were passenger pigeons. Estimates of their numbers vary between 3 and 5 billion birds. They would sit on a branch, and sometimes there were so many that it would break the branch. Now, by 1900, there were no flocks left in the wild. And in 1914, the very last passenger pigeon died in the Cincinnati Zoo. Her name was Martha. R.I.P. Martha, the passenger pigeon. So what happened? How did this species go from 5 billion to nothing? The passenger pigeon's secret was that there was strength in numbers. There were so many of them. A predator could come through and eat 10 and it wouldn't make a dent in the flock. It's called predator satiation. It's kind of like rabbits, where they breed so quickly that even if a predator came through and ate half of the rabbits, the half of the rabbits that were left was enough for the next generation. Around the time of the Civil War, people thought you could never make a dent in their numbers. There were so many of them, and they weren't a musical bird. They were a loud bird, but they didn't have a beautiful song. They came through and they clucked, and they were loud, and they were harsh, and they were awkward, and it must have been really annoying having thousands of passenger pigeons outside of your house. Must have been really distracting. As Americans moved west, we took away their natural habitat, the berries, the seeds that they would normally eat, and we planted things. So they came through and they ate crops, which was also really annoying to early Americans. But they were good for something, and that was that they tasted delicious. You can find many passenger pigeon recipes in old cookbooks from around the turn of the century. The passenger pigeon was kind of like a game hen. It wasn't as big as a chicken. It was less than a pound. It was a little snack. And it was cheap. There were so many of them that the meat was cheap. Now, at the time, the railroads were expanding west too. Only a few hunters could kill many thousands of passenger pigeons, load up the bodies onto the rail carts, and send them back east, where people in the cities would eat them. The idea was, we can just keep doing this forever. We're never going to run out of passenger pigeons. There's just too many of them. Famous last words. Show me a passenger pigeon. Early American frontiersmen overhunted the passenger pigeon. They did things like set baited traps and burn land and kill them en masse. People thought, oh my God, it's impossible to kill all of these. We can just keep eating forever. They're all gone now. Some biologists have tried to say that the numbers of the passenger pigeon fluctuate, and 1800 was just a very good year where there happened to be 5 billion of them. But their numbers went up and down. There was an ebb and flow, and we didn't hunt them all. Well, clearly we did hunt them all, because the ebb and flow does not go from 5 billion to 0. An ebb and flow is 5 billion to 3 billion, maybe down to 100 million, not to 0. That is not an ebb and flow. That is an extinction. And more recent biologists have come forward to say, look, we all know we hunted them to extinction. Here is the evidence for that. Now, it wasn't all bad. Well, it was for the passenger pigeon. But for the United States, it actually taught us a lesson. The government put in laws to say that we cannot hunt an entire species to extinction, that we could not transport endangered species across state lines. So we didn't really understand how powerful the railroad was and how powerful our appetites are. Now, killing 5 billion passenger pigeons over the course of a century might seem extreme. How could we even do that? 5 billion is so many. But when you think that Americans eat 9 billion chickens a year now, it's actually more reasonable to think so. Because the passenger pigeons were really small. They weren't a full chicken. They were like a third of a chicken. You couldn't feed an entire family on one passenger pigeon. You had to get 5 or 6. An entire family had to eat an entire family of passenger pigeons. By today's standards, people of 1900 weren't even eating that much. They were just eating. And the population of the United States was growing. So we outpaced our resources and ate every one of these birds. Can you believe Americans eat 9 billion chickens a year? That's 27 chickens per person per year, which is 1 chicken every 2 weeks. Is that how much chicken you eat? It's probably about how much chicken I eat. I do like chicken like that. So that makes sense. 9 billion a year. And our chickens are big and they're fat. And a chicken can feed a whole family for a night. A passenger pigeon was not like that. So basically, every movie you have ever seen about the 1800s is wrong because the skies are not filled with passenger pigeons. To make those movies accurate, they would have to breed theater pigeons and just release them into the sky, and then wardrobe would be upset because all the costumes would be covered in bird droppings. We really can't make a movie about the 1800s that's accurate like that. Whatever movie you're picturing about the 1800s, just add 10,000 birds to the background. Isn't that crazy? We ate a whole species. Subscribe!